Hey everyone, in this video I'm going to share with you three solid strategies that have allowed me to drastically reduce my rumination, my overthinking, my catastrophizing, and just the negative thought spiraling in my head in general. And as a result, this has allowed me to take so much more action and take so many more steps towards building my dream life. But first, I just want to share a story of that happened to me a couple of years ago when I was walking up on stage about to do an impromptu speech. So, a bit of context, like earlier that day, I had done my first ever paid public speaking gig. So I was feeling super, super confident. And at my Toastmasters club, which is public speaking club, when they asked if they wanted any volunteers to come up and do an impromptu speech, I put my hand up without thinking. I was, super confident. And I got up there and they asked me a question. I can't remember what it was, but I went into full panic mode. So in my head, I was trying to be funny. I started doing something, and I noticed the crowd didn't laugh. And suddenly, it was like I was like a deer in headlights, right? I just completely went blank, and I couldn't think of anything. And this painful silence in front of a crowd of maybe 20, 30 people, I completely, I went completely blank, and it lasted for about, I don't know, a minute before I said something. And eventually I finished my speech and went back to sit down. And I just remember feeling so much shame in that moment. And it was such an uncomfortable feeling. And after that, after that event, I remember being feeling very anxious about public speaking. And so whenever it came to any kind of public speaking event, I would be overthinking, I would be catastrophizing, I would, yeah, be constantly in my head and, my thoughts just not serving me. And I guess one of the things that I realized in this moment is that because I would feel a lot of anxiety, but a lot of anxiety comes or is it lives in the future essentially. And that most of our suffering and the suffering that I was putting myself through as a result of this was actually coming from the anticipation of suffering. So so it wasn't my like my anxiety was more caused by the fear of being anxious. And there's this great quote by Montaigu who says, um, my life has been full of misfortunes, most of which have never happened. And so there's this it's this funny idea that most of our suffering actually doesn't come from actual events. It comes from the thinking and the overthinking and the rumination. And if you really think about it, like we are limited human beings in a world of limitless possibilities. And so it's actually impossible for us to be able to anticipate every single thing that's going to happen to us. And so it's just a flawed strategy. But if we think of why do we anticipate? Why do we overthink? Why do we ruminate? Well, actually, the reason is, well, it's that it's a form of control. It's a form of trying to predict the future. It's a form of trying to predict exactly what's going to happen because we don't trust ourselves to handle the uncomfortable feelings that might come as a result. So, for example, when it came to feeling, well, public speaking and embarrassing myself, feeling shame, I didn't believe that I could handle that emotion again. So then I was overthinking. I was trying to control everything and predict everything that was going to happen to me, so I could avoid being in that moment. But the irony is that it's more yeah the need that we have for anticipation comes because we don't believe we can handle those feelings. And so actually the key to spending less time ruminating, the key to spending less time overthinking, catastrophizing, is actually learning to trust that you will be able to handle these uncomfortable emotions. And so the three strategies that I used to do that and that have completely changed everything have been the following. So the first one is to really learn to be okay with my emotions. So allowing myself to feel the full range of emotions, the full spectrum of emotions. Because if you don't allow yourself to feel sadness, to feel fear, um, to feel any like even anger, well, you're going to limit your ability to even feel joy and enthusiasm and happiness. So it's really important to be able to feel the full range of emotions because once you can, be with yourself and allow yourself to feel these emotions, you're automatically going to be less scared of feeling them, and so you'll have less anticipation, and so you'll have less of a need for control, and so less overthinking. And so I'll drop a link in the description of like a guide that I made on how you can feel and welcome and process your emotions. But that was one of the keys for me was really get comfortable with my own emotions. And I was having a discussion with a client who said, "Oh, but I'm very comfortable with my emotions. I cry a lot during movies when they're sad." And which that's a great step, right? If you go from, someone who never cries, but then if you're someone who cries during movies, at least you're partly in touch with your emotions. But then the next level is when's the last time you've cried for yourself or something that's happened to you, right? Because that's a very different level of sadness. And so if you tell yourself that you're comfortable with your emotions, like ask yourself, when's the last time I felt strong negative emotions when it came to something that was happening to me, not something happening externally. So yeah, the first strategy is become very comfortable with feeling your emotions because then the fear of feeling them will be less, and so there'll be less anticipation and less overthinking. The second one, and this has been a game changer for me, is accepting or believing that life is happening for me, not to me. And so that's not a truth. That's a choice. It's something that I choose to believe. So I choose to believe that whenever anything happens to me, it's happening for me, not to me. So it's however you want to put it. I often like to put it as a gift from the universe for my own personal growth and development. And what that does is that it just gives you the power to choose how to interpret your circumstances versus being a victim of and thinking that life is happening to you. Because when it's happening for you, it's there, it's empowering, and it means that yeah, that you can interpret your life however you want to. And so when it comes to overthinking and ruminating, it also adds that level of trust that okay, whatever happens, I will learn from it. Um, for example, when I had my burnout, at the time it was one of the worst things that ever happened to me. But looking back, I see that this happened for me because it allowed me to change completely change the direction of my life. It allowed me to learn more about personal development, learn more about myself, and as a result, I'm way less scared of anything like that happening again because I know that I'll be fine, and that I'll actually be able to learn and grow from it. So again, that takes away from this need for anticipation. And the third and final point, and that is learning to be there for yourself, right? So are you going to be there for yourself in these uncomfortable moments? So the best analogy that I found for this is just imagine that you were following your child. So let's say what your own child around, and you got to be that little voice in their ear, like constantly throughout the day, whenever they face failure, whenever they are I don't know, made fun of at school, or whenever they fall over or embarrass themselves. And imagine if you could be that little voice in your child's head. Like, how would you speak to that little child? Would you be like, it's okay, it's okay to experience this. Like, don't worry, I'm here for you. And to kind of use that exact same voice with yourself. And so if we look back to my example of messing or going blank on stage, well, I one of the things I didn't necessarily do at the time, but I did eventually afterwards, was just be there for myself. So, be like, it's okay, man, like this happens, and allowing myself to fully feel that shame and not have an extra voice beating myself up on top of it, but having someone else being like, it's okay, you'll get back up, just keep going. And eventually using that approach was what allowed me to get back up on stage. And I went back on stage like 2 weeks later, and I was able to do that. Well, one, because I allowed myself to feel these emotions of shame, and I sat with my shame. And two, because I knew that whatever happened, it would be happening for me. And so even if I look back as to the previous event, what it made me realize that I still had some unresolved shame that I needed to process. And that event allowed me to flush that out. And so I realized, okay, I still, have a lot of shame that I need to process, and I was able to do that. And as a result, I was able to grow. And the third reason I was able to get back on stage, get back up on stage, sorry, was because I knew that I would be there for myself, that I had my own back, and that whatever happened, whatever like even if I went blank, or no matter what happened, I would be there for myself. And as a result, that speech went actually really, really well, and I won. There's a mini competition. I won that. So so yeah, so if we like sum this up, right, and bring this back to you. So if you want to drastically reduce your overthinking, your rumination, your even your anxiety, you want to first realize like where this comes from. And first of all, it comes from a need for control. And the need for control often comes because of fear, because we are afraid of the uncomfortable feelings that might come from whatever happens, right? And that can be fear of failure, it can be fear of rejection, it can be a fear of loss. So the way for you to reduce this is to first acknowledge that, one, you are a limited human being in a world of limitless possibility. So it's actually impossible for you to control everything. So the key is actually to learn to trust yourself, and you do that by, one, being able to fully feel your emotions and being comfortable feeling your emotions. Two, by choosing to believe that life is happening for you and not to you. And three, by learning to be there for yourself. And so you can imagine that you're speaking to a younger child, but are you going to be there for yourself if you start a business and it fails? Are you going to be there for yourself when you try to learn a new skill and you're not necessarily that good in the first couple of months? Are you going to be there for yourself in these uncomfortable moments? And if you can, use these three strategies, then I guarantee you that you are going to very well, you are going to very much reduce your overthinking and catastrophizing and ruminating and this constant need for anticipation. So yeah, anyways, I really hope you found this video useful. And as always, sending you loads of love. Take care.